Last July, Sang-yu underwent a liver transplant. She had liver cancer and finally got a donor match. A partial liver transplant could greatly improve her condition. The morning before the surgery, a little white bird landed on the window ledge of her hospital room. It chirped incessantly, waking her up. Sang-yu lay quietly, watching it hop back and forth on the ledge. It suddenly reminded her of her younger brother, Sang-yi. Back in elementary school, their school held a talent show, and her brother had to play the role of a dove. To make him a costume, Sang-yu plucked nearly every feather off their household chickens, ducks, and geese, crafting a pair of wings for him to wear. Sang-yu was so thrilled that he ran around the yard like he could fly. Their father scolded her. "I asked you to look after your brother, not spoil him to the skies." Sang-yu laughed. "Mom told me to do it. Should I listen to you or her?" Their dad replied, "Then listen to your mom. Always listen to your mom." Sang-yu's mom passed away early, when Sang-yu was just 3 years old. Before she died, their mom held Sang-yu's hand and said, "Xiaoyu, you're the elder sister. Help mom take care of your little brother. Your dad has a rough temper. Can you spoil Xiaoyu a little for me?" Sang-yu was only 7 at the time, just 4 years older than her brother. Their family lived in a small, remote town. Her father worked at a printing factory, but the factory's fortunes were dwindling. To raise Sang-yu and Sang-yi, the family sank deep into debt. A few years later, the factory couldn't pay salaries anymore. Eventually, their father left to work in another city, still in printing. There was no one else to take care of the siblings, so it was just the 2 kids left at home. Now, Sang-yu and her father laugh about it. "You know that was illegal, right?" Her father would retort, "Kids were cheap back then. Besides, if I hadn't gone out to work, letting you starve at home wouldn't have been illegal." Sang-yu understood her dad had no choice, but raising her brother alone had indeed been tough. After all, she was only 11, not even out of elementary school yet. Their father sent them 100 yuan a month for living expenses. The sibling staple food was boiled noodles, cheap and easy to make. Each time, Sang-yu would crack an egg for her brother as a treat. But Sang-yu was picky. Other people make egg drop soup. That's the only good way to do it. Yours tastes awful. Sang-yu snapped at him. "You're just a kid, and already so fussy." Years later, Sang-yu was working in a big city and had a girlfriend. Once, when Sang-yu visited, the girlfriend cooked a late-night snack with a poached egg. Sang-yu was surprised. "Xiaoyu eats this now?" He used to insist on egg drop soup. The girlfriend laughed. "It was for you back then. He didn't want you to go without." Sang-yu scoffed. "Huh, he's just making himself look good now." But deep down, she knew it was true. Sang-yu realized that people today are increasingly reluctant to admit their true feelings. Even among family, they often cover up their emotions with jokes and laughter. But what they don't realize is that pretending to be carefree, over time, becomes genuine detachment. Thinking back, Sang-yu couldn't believe how distant Sang-yi had become. Once, he'd clung to her like a shadow. When Sang-yu cooked, he did his homework by the kitchen door. If he got out of school early, he'd wait for her at her school gate without fail. They even shared the same room growing up. During thunderstorms or high winds, he'd crawl into Sang-yu's bed. Truthfully, she'd been scared too. But having Sang-yi curled up next to her like a little kitten made her feel safe. On weekends, Sang-yu sold stationery and notebooks at the street market. Even as a little kid, Sang-yi helped carry things, refusing to stay home, even when he was sick. As an adult, Sang-yu read many stories about left-behind children and realized how lucky they'd been. No one bullied them and plenty of people helped. In their small town, where everyone knew everyone, kindness was abundant. The market manager never charged Sang-yu a fee for her stall. Neighbors with school-age kids always bought their supplies from her. Even the intimidating guy selling steamed buns, the one who always snagged the best spots, would save a place for Sang-yu and Sang-yi on weekends. One evening, a sudden rainstorm caught them unprepared. Sang-yu hurried to pack up, but they had no raincoat. Sang-yi, wearing just a t-shirt, instinctively took it off to shield their paper goods from the rain, standing bare-chested as he got soaked. That night, he came down with a fever. Sang-yu scolded him. "Are you stupid? A few notebooks ruined don't matter. Your health does." He weakly replied, "It wasn't about the notebooks. It was our living expenses." In that moment, Sang-yu felt a deep, indescribable ache. The tragedy of left-behind children wasn't just poverty, it was the loss of childhood. Because poverty can be overcome, but childhood comes only once, and theirs was spent surviving. A few years later, Sang-yu's father started earning more money and could send them 500 yuan a month. The siblings finally didn't need to set up stalls anymore. But the good days didn't last long. The following year, their father's remittances were delayed. When he finally called, he asked Sang-yu to hold on. At that time, Sang-yu's school required evening self-study sessions. She asked her teacher for permission to leave at night to work. Her homeroom teacher, knowing her family situation, let her go. Sang-yu worked as a waitress at a barbecue restaurant, finishing her shifts at midnight every day. Sang-yi, in his first year of middle school, always came to pick her up from work. Sang-yu said, "You don't need to come. You have school tomorrow morning." Sang-yu retorted, "I'm not a little kid anymore. It's fine." One time, Sang-yu got off work late, around 1 a.m., and found Sang-yi asleep on the table, head down from exhaustion. On the way home, Sang-yu wouldn't let him ride his bike, fearing he might fall in his half-asleep state. She gave him a ride instead. Sang-yu said, "It's so much better at home. Why do you insist on coming out with me? It's tiring." Resting his head on her back, Sang-yu replied, "Sister, Mom's gone, and Dad's away. I only have you. If we live together. If something happens, we face it together. Let's not separate, okay?" Sang-yu agreed, tears inexplicably streaming down her face. This so-called depending on each other is a bond only understood after overcoming hardships. Because you must fight to live, there's no time to pity yourself. But that day, Sang-yu distinctly felt the loneliness of her existence in this world. Thankfully, she had Sang-yi. Many people said Sang-yu was too good to Sang-yi, taking care of every aspect of his life and spending all her earnings on him. But Sang-yu always felt they took care of each other. Even when Sang-yi was a child, he gave her tremendous emotional support. 1 year later, just before the Lunar New Year, their father finally returned home. But seeing him for the first time in years, Sang-yu didn't feel joy, only shock. Sang-yu was so frightened he didn't dare approach. Their father's hands were missing 8 fingers. He'd been a skilled paper cutter, but after working 12 hours nonstop, an accident happened. Sang-yu had always resented her father for neglecting them. But looking at his mutilated hands, both she and her brother wept uncontrollably from heartbreak. She had always longed for a complete family, never imagining it would reunite in such a cruel way. That year, Sang-yu was 17. Her grades had always been average, and with the turmoil at home during her final year, her college entrance exam results weren't even good enough for a second-tier university. That evening, their father called Sang-yu into his room for a talk. "You know our situation. Don't bother with repeating a year. My injury compensation is only 50,000 yuan. I want to save some for your brother's future wedding."
"Son, are you not that?"
"I understand, Dad. You don't need to explain. I wasn't planning to repeat the year anyway." At that moment, Sang-yu barged in. Sang-yu had never seen him so angry. He shouted at their father, "No, my sister has to repeat. She didn't do well because she was too tired taking care of me while you weren't here. Now that you're back, she'll do well." Their father retorted, "You're just a kid. Stay out of adults' business." Sang-yu shot back coldly, "If you wanted to be in charge, you should have been around earlier. Don't meddle now. If my sister doesn't go to college, she'll end up working in factories like you. Do you want that? Look at yourself, how dangerous it is. Let her go back to school. If she doesn't, then I won't either." Sang-yi cried as he spoke, his tears moving Sang-yu to tears as well. Their father let out a long sigh.
Fine.
One more year. But when it's time for you to get married, don't come asking me for money. Still sobbing, Sang-yi sniffled. I don't want a wife. I just want my sister. Sang-yu had truly intended not to continue her studies. She knew their family's situation well. But her brother's words reminded her that for small-town girls like her, education often determines the limits of their lives. Sang-yu had seen too many girls marry right after graduating high school, like figs ripening too soon, blooming only briefly before bearing fruit. That's why she always believed she couldn't love Sang-yi too much. Because just as her life seemed about to cap, he burst in and pushed her toward a new horizon. That year, Sang-yu studied relentlessly, knowing how precious this second chance was. She remembered a boy in her repeat class pursuing her, but she rejected him outright. With a blank expression, Sang-yu said, I have no time for anything else. I'm not interested. Go find someone else. Looking back, it seemed harsh, but back then, she was wholly focused. Nothing could distract her from her studies. After a year of hard work, Sang-yu finally achieved her goal, admission to a prestigious university in the city. Her life turned a new page, or rather, her family's life entered a new chapter. At the same time, the street market implemented a move from roads to indoor stalls initiative. The community committee helped Sang-yu's father secure a spot for a breakfast stall. From then on, their family's life began to improve. In university, Sang-yu worked part-time and by sophomore year stopped asking for money from home. By her third year, Sang-yi also got accepted into a university in the same city. Their father paid his tuition, while Sang-yu covered his living expenses. Sang-yu had a friend, Ching-zi, who invited her to join an educational business venture. They consolidated student resources to offer one-on-one tutoring and small classes. It was a booming industry then, and they were lucky to catch the wave. The year Sang-yu graduated, while her classmates worried about jobs, she earned her first substantial income. A business investor noticed her potential, funding their venture and turning it into a formal education company. That friend, Ching-zi, eventually became her boyfriend, and a few years later, her husband. He was Sang-yu's partner in both life and work. Their personalities complemented each other, and they shared the same passions. People often said they were a perfect match. Sang-yi liked him immediately upon meeting him. But Ching-zi eventually discovered something that led to Sang-yu and Sang-yi growing distant. Sang-yi worked hard in school and earned admission to a top-tier university. After graduation, he secured a position at a prestigious state-owned enterprise. From the start of his college years, Sang-yu made sure he never lacked for anything financially. Sang-yi, understanding her sacrifices, never spent recklessly. When Sang-yi graduated, Sang-yu bought him a car and paid the down payment for an apartment. People criticized her, calling her a pushover sister. But deep down, she felt an unfillable void. Though Sang-yu was not their mother, she had promised to take care of her younger brother, fulfilling the role their mother would have played. Without Sang-ye's support during her challenging times, Sang-yu believed she might have been stuck in the cycle of marriage and motherhood, without any prospects for her own future. As adults, many try to compensate for the gaps in their childhood, whether by buying toys or indulging in dreams. For Sang-yu, all she wanted was to take good care of her brother. Despite Sang-ye's tall and lean frame, he couldn't put on weight. Sang-yu always blamed their impoverished childhood, believing it had caused lasting effects on his health. Her husband, Ching-zi, sympathized with her. Coming from a single-parent household himself, he said, I understand how kids who grow up hard want to give back when life gets better. It's about empathy. At 23, Sang-yi had a good job, a home, and a car. Everything was in place, except for a girlfriend. Several introductions were arranged, but none sparked his interest. During one dinner, Ching-zi jokingly teased him, Don't tell me you like boys, Sang-yi. Startled, Sang-yi blurted, Of course not. I already have a girlfriend. Sang-yu exclaimed, What? Since when? Why haven't you brought her home? Sang-yi, embarrassed, promised, next weekend. From Sang Ye's hesitant attitude, Sang Yu sensed something was amiss about this mysterious girlfriend. When she finally met her, she understood. Her name was Du Hailon, 4 years older than Sang Yi, and the same age as Sang Yu, 3 months her senior, in fact. Hailon only held a diploma and worked as a contract employee in Sang Ye's company. She came from a rural family with many siblings and had never returned home since graduating college. On paper, she was no match for Sang Yi. Her only redeeming qualities seemed to be her gentle and caring nature. Sang Yu kept quiet during their meeting, but voiced her concerns to their father afterward. Their father responded cautiously, "Give it some time. We've endured tough days too. Your brother's a smart boy. He knows right from wrong." Their father's generation was one of unyielding perseverance, able to endure any hardship. However, he couldn't adapt to city life and chose to return to his hometown after a brief visit. That day, he added, "You have your own family now. If your brother finds someone who cares for him, that's a good thing. One successful person in a family is enough. Unlike you two, both so capable, yet you can't even find time to have kids." Sang Yu was momentarily speechless. Her father's words made Sang Yu reconsider. Living in the city had conditioned her to expect financial and social parity in relationships. Yet, perhaps an imbalance of circumstances could lead to a more stable marriage. Thus began 2 years of careful observation as Sang Yi and Du Hailon dated. During this time, Sang Yu visited Hailon's rural hometown, which was indeed impoverished. However, the people were warm and genuine. At family gatherings in the city, Hailon's gentle demeanor and industrious nature became more apparent. Chung Zi quipped, "Looks like your brother has a bit of a mother complex." Maybe he did. An elder sister could never replace a mother. Children who grow up without one carry that wound for life. Gradually, Sang Yu grew less opposed to the relationship. When Sang Yi announced plans to marry, Hailon was 29. After all, Sang Yu gave her blessing and started planning the wedding. They picked a venue, and Chung Zi recommended a friend's restaurant. After the tasting, everyone agreed it was perfect. That evening, however, Chung Zi received a phone call that darkened his expression. He stepped out to take the call, returning only after a long while. Sang Yu sensed something was wrong and pressed him for answers. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "This wedding can't happen." Shocked, Sang Yu demanded, "Why not? What happened?" Chung Zi reluctantly revealed, "My friend recognized Hailon. She used to be a hostess at a nightclub." Sang Yu felt her mind go blank. The next day, Sang Yu confronted Sang Yi and Du Hailon, demanding the truth. It was then Sang Yi finally admitted Hailon was deceived into working at a nightclub after college. She was trapped and forced to serve drinks to guests, but nothing more. She was only freed when the place got shut down. Sang Yu erupted, "So she has a criminal record?" Sang Yi quickly explained, "No, she doesn't. She was a victim." "Do you actually believe that?" Sang Yu was livid. "It doesn't matter why. Did she do it or not? I can't accept this. Our family's reputation is spotless, and I won't let it be tarnished by someone like her." Sang Yi shoved her hand away. "You need to respect other people. I'm 25. Who I marry is my decision, not yours." It was the first time Sang Yi had ever spoken so harshly to his sister. Sang Yu, losing control, shouted back, "As long as I'm your sister, I'll make sure this doesn't happen." Suddenly, Du Hailon stood up. That day, she spoke only one sentence. "You don't have to fight. I'll leave." Sang Yu initially thought Hailon's decisive departure showed a rare sense of self-awareness. Within a month, Hailon had quietly resigned from her job, left a farewell letter, and disappeared from Sang Yi's life. In her letter, Hailon wrote, "Being with Sang Yi felt like a dream I never deserved. It's time to wake up." However, Sang Yi later suspected it was merely a tactic. Shortly after the breakup, Sang Yi fell into depression. His work suffered, and he began resenting Sang Yu. During one drunken family dinner, he confronted her. "Why? Are you just selfish? Do you not want me to leave you?" You have your own family, so why destroy mine? The words stung Sang-yu, making her question whether she had been too harsh. But upon reflection, she realized those accusations didn't sound like something Sang-yu would say. Eventually, she discovered that within a year of their separation, Sang-yi and Do Hailon had resumed a long-distance relationship. Another year later, after the October holidays, Sang-yi sent her a text. Yeah, I've thought it through. I still want to be with Hailon. I'm leaving. Please don't look for me. He blocked her immediately after. And so, the little brother who used to cling to her during thunderstorms, the one she had devoted her life to protecting, walked out of her life without looking back. Sang-yu searched for Sang-yi for a long time in the provincial capital of Do Hailon's hometown, but to no avail. It was clear he had been planning his disappearance for a long time. At that time, Sang-yu felt like she was on the verge of losing her mind. The following Chinese New Year, Sang-yi finally sent a message on WeChat to let Sang-yu know he was safe. Seeing the message, Sang-yu burst into tears. She called him on video, asking where he was. Sang-yi hung up and called back with an audio message. Sis, can you stop looking for me? Let me and Hailon live our lives in peace. Tears streamed down Sang-yu's face. She pleaded, Can't you just come back? Come back, and we'll let you live however you want. Please. Sang-yu paused for a long time before ending the call and blocking her again. In the years that followed, Sang-yi maintained sporadic contact with Sang-yu, but still refused to meet in person, not even through video calls. Sang-yu could sense his resistance, but knew that it stemmed from Do Hailon's influence over him. There was nothing Sang-yu could do. Sang-yu was too far away, and Do Hailon was by his side every day. It was a battle Sang-yu could not win. Later, the pandemic hit, and the company's business began to decline. During that time, everyone was filled with anxiety and shifted focus to online operations. However, even after surviving the pandemic, the industry itself couldn't recover. Sang-yu once fainted in a conference room while encouraging her team. Sometimes she wondered if her mother was angry with her. Her mother had also passed from liver cancer. When Sang-yu was diagnosed, it was already too late for a cure. Sang-yu felt most relieved that she and Ching-zi hadn't had children. There was no need for her child to bear such pain. The doctors told her that her only chance at survival was a liver transplant. Sang-yu dared not hope, but miraculously, a match was found. When the hospital called to inform her, it felt like a dream for both her and Ching-zi. At first, she didn't dare tell Sang-yi about her cancer. Perhaps she felt that if death was inevitable, she'd rather he not know. But now that there was hope for survival, she prayed every day for Sang-yi to reach out. Even up until 2 days before her surgery, Sang-yi still hadn't contacted her. All she had for company was a small, white bird perched on her hospital room window. It hopped and chirped, reminding her of Sang-yi, as if he were right there, yet invisible. Sang-yu had a suspicion. Before entering the operating room, she grabbed Ching-zi's hand. This liver, it isn't Sang-yi's, is it? He replied, What nonsense are you saying? If we could find him, it would be a miracle. The surgery was a success. A month later, Sang-yu was discharged from the hospital. But the question she had asked before the surgery lingered in her mind. While recovering, she read various materials. On her first night home, she brought it up again with Ching-zi. This was a living donor transplant, wasn't it? Brain-dead donor transplants require immediate preparation. Why did I have to wait a day to get admitted? Ching-zi hadn't anticipated her question and froze. Sang-yu lowered her gaze and said softly, Just tell me the truth, please. Ching-zi sighed and nodded. The donor didn't want you to know, but you're so persistent. Sang-yu's heart sank. Was it really him? Where is he now? Why won't he see me? Ching-zi looked at her solemnly and shook his head. It's not what you think. The donor wasn't Sang-yi. It was Do Hailon. Sometimes, Sang-yu felt foolish for having searched half the country when they had only moved to a nearby town. Ching-zi drove her there. Do Hailon had recovered better than Sang-yu and was surprised to see her. Sang Yu grabbed her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for being willing to save me." Du Halen's voice was as gentle as ever. "You're Xiao Ye's sister. His last wish was for me to take care of you." When Sang Yu heard the words "last wish," her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. Her heart felt like soft cotton pierced by a sharp blade. It turned out that Sang Yi had passed away years ago in a car accident. At the time, Du Hailan had informed Cheng Zi, who decided not to tell Sang Yu. During that period, Sang Yu had already shown signs of depression due to her struggles in both work and her search for her brother. Cheng Zi feared she couldn't bear the truth, so he kept it from her. Thus, for years, Du Hailan had been replying to Sang Yu's messages, pretending to be Sang Yi. Recently, Sang Yu came across a news story about a man who had a butterfly land on his chest on his wedding day. His grandmother had said before her death that she would turn into a butterfly to attend his wedding. Immediately, Sang Yu thought of the little white bird that had perched on her hospital window. That must have been Sang Yi. His lover gave part of her liver to his sister, and through this, he was telling Sang Yu that he had made the right choice, that he had chosen well. Sometimes Sang Yu wondered if it was all done out of love, but caused so much harm. Had she not opposed them back then, she might have been the happiest person in the world today. But there were no ifs in life. Regret was useless, and so was remorse. All she could do was spend a lifetime healing a wound that would never fully close.